I mean, they're killing my friends. As simple as that. And I've been all the years that I've been alive.
So you don't agree then? I mean, when people say, oh, it's okay for him, he's escaped.
What have I escaped? Where, anyway, would I go to escape? To your country? Where would a fleeing black man go if he wanted to escape? If you break faith with what you know, that's a betrayal of many, 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 many people. I may know 6 people, but that's enough. Love has never been a popular movement, and no one's ever wanted really to be free. The world is held together, really it is held together, by the love and the passion of very few people.
I'm an abolitionist. Yes, that does mean I believe we need to abolish prisons, policing, and America's entire criminal system as it exists. But we recognize that the powers that be won't simply open up all the cells and close all the courts tomorrow, just as we recognize that we do not yet have the resources, the institutions, and the support systems in place to make that feasible. But we also recognize that mass incarceration is invested in ensuring that we never do. Which is why the first thing you should know is that abolition is a vision for the future. A world where we've divested from police, courts, and prisons, because instead of pumping money into the criminalization of the most disenfranchised among us, we've put that money into addressing the root causes of crime, like poverty, unemployment, poor housing, starved school systems, mental health issues, and more. We must reckon with what our criminal system is to understand why abolition isn't about depriving us of the means to stop crime or address harm. It's allowing us to design a system where we do those things for the very first time, because that is not what we currently do. Mass incarceration is slavery, a fact that the 13th Amendment explicitly acknowledges by abolishing slavery except for anyone convicted of a crime. In the same breath that the US government purported to abolish slavery, they established the means to continue the practice. And slavery is as much a business as it is a sin. And a business is meant not just to continue, but to expand, to make more and more money. Nearly 2 million people are incarcerated in America, over 400,000 of whom have not had a trial or been convicted of any crime. Nearly 60% of all incarcerated people are Black or Latino, and the vast majority of incarcerated people earned wages below the poverty line prior to their arrest. And America makes over $11 billion yearly in goods produced by prison labor, both private and public. Incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people owe at least $27.6 billion in fines and fees nationwide. Their families spend over $2.9 billion in commissaries each year, in addition to another $14.8 billion in costs associated with moving, eviction, and homelessness brought on by these cases. No system that is designed and maintained in furtherance of making money by subjugating and imprisoning specific populations for allegedly committing certain harms simultaneously intends to rid us of those harms and thus their means of production. So if slavery is a system of bondage where a person is treated as property, deprived of their freedom and personal liberty, and forced to perform labor for another's gain, mass incarceration is slavery. And it's making the rich richer and absolutely no one safer. But I understand that in spite of everything I'm going to say to you, if this is the first time you're hearing about abolition, or maybe you even know a little about it, it might seem impossible or crazy. And that's fair. The first time I heard about abolition, I was a junior in college being introduced to Our Prisons Obsolete by Angela Davis by my thesis advisor, and it sounded crazy to me too. But if you want to change someone's mind about something, the first thing you need to understand, what I believe my professor understood when she referred me to Angela Davis, instead of engaging how taken aback I was at the very concept of abolition, is that nobody ever abandons their entire worldview the first time it's challenged. It doesn't matter how many facts, stats, case studies, compelling narratives, or undeniable evidence you have on your side, people simply do not rip the foundation out from under themselves at the first indication that there may be cracks. People believe what they're taught, and rarely on their own do they have occasion to question what was presented to them as fundamental truths. The sky is blue, grass is green, cops are good, robbers are bad, justice is served when someone goes to jail. But just having it brought to my attention that we didn't always have or rely on prisons, combined with the realization that there are other countries that do not invest in punitive prison systems and instead invest in genuinely care-based, community-based, rehabilitative models, immediately shifted my world. Just learning that it was possible to have a society without prisons instantly diminished how radical the mere suggestion had seemed to me, because up until that point, I'd never noticed that because I was born into a world with prisons, I thought they were as natural to earth as dirt, water, and air, rather than the man-made institutions that they are. But before we can understand how we get to abolition and why it's necessary, we first must understand why mass incarceration and prisons aren't, and exactly what they're meant to accomplish. When you say you want to abolish the prison industrial complex, or more specifically, policing in prisons, one of the first things people ask you is how then will we stop crime? And the premise that underlines that question, that our existing system does this, is wrong. Because our criminal system does not address, stop, or prevent crime, because that's not what it's intended to do. In fact, it's meant to reproduce it. America's criminal system is a vehicle for maintaining racial, social, and economic inequality by criminalizing poor Black and brown communities, using them for labor, and saddling them with debt, trauma, and rap sheets whose lifelong collateral consequences can rarely be outrun. It's not a coincidence that the same communities dubbed high crime areas are those most under-resourced and remain that way generation after generation. We all want to live in a society that is free of crime and the social ills that reproduce it. But continuing to invest in policing and mass incarceration of communities whose well-being we've never invested in only takes us further and further away from that goal. In America, the police killed at least 1,195 people in 2020 that we know of, and they've already killed 320 people this year. Black people were 26% of people killed by police in 2022, despite being only 13% of the population. According to the Vera Institute of Justice, police arrest someone every 3 seconds in this country. Yet, a 2020 review from University of Utah professor Shima Bergholm found that police solve just 2% of all major crimes. But the United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world and spends an estimated $300 billion yearly on policing in prisons, a figure that has continued to skyrocket despite record drops in crime. Yet, political leaders in the media continue to sensationalize and manufacture crime waves to scare the public into feeling unsafe, no matter how divorced that feeling is from reality, so that we continue to support inflated police budgets, militarized police departments, and incarcerating residents of the most under-resourced communities. Still, people ask abolitionists, what will we do about the rapists and the murderers without prisons? First, it's worth noting that more than 80% of arrests nationwide are for misdemeanors, low-level, and non-violent offenses. Rape, murder, and other horrific and sensationalized crimes are simply not a reflection of the bulk of what's in our criminal system. They're just what receives the most media attention. Further and importantly, condemning violence doesn't stop it from reoccurring. Understanding and alleviating the causes of violence does. But to the question, what do we do about the rapists? To that I ask, what are we doing about them now? In a piece for The Guardian titled, "Who Will Protect You from Rape Without Police?" Moira Donegan answers the question perfectly, and she says, and I quote, "But the notion that abolishing the police will have negative repercussions for women radically misunderstands both American policing and sexual violence. Police abolition need not be considered an abdication of the responsibility to protect women, but rather a way to fulfill it. Police never investigate most sexual violence because most sexual violence goes unreported. According to the Rape and Incest National Network, or RAIN, a little less than 25% of sexual assaults are reported to the police, significantly less than other violent crimes. There is ample evidence that sexual assault victims who distrust the police are correct. Police departments systematically fail to make arrests in sexual assault cases, and their failures are mirrored throughout the justice system. According to RAIN, only 4.6% of sexual assaults ever lead to arrest, 4.6, and only 0.9% are ever referred by police to prosecutors. Conviction rates are also lower than for other violent crimes, in part because of police mishandling the sexual assault cases. Then there's this troubling fact. The police themselves are often perpetrators of gender violence, and they frequently use the privileges and protections of their job to hurt women with impunity. Police households have dramatically higher rates of domestic violence than other homes, with approximately 40% of officers having intimate partner violence in their households, compared to just 10% of the general population. Sometimes police failures to investigate sexual violence look like the result not just of stupidity, but outright duplicity, she says. One study of the New York Police Department discovered it was knowingly undercounting rapes in its public figures, using a deliberately strict definition of rape in order to shrink the number of reported rapes in New York. An inquiry into the NYPD found its Special Victims Unit division to be grossly dysfunctional, with officers instructed to simply not investigate misdemeanor sexual assault cases. Conservative estimates indicate that American police departments have over 200,000 untested rape kits in their possession, with DNA samples that could be used to identify rapists and prevent future assaults collecting dust, often because police have not bothered to send them to be tested. On top of that, a 2015 investigation by the Associated Press found that roughly 1,000 officers lost their badges in a 6-year period for rape, sodomy, and other sexual assault, sex crimes that included possession of child pornography, or sexual misconduct such as propositioning citizens or having consensual but prohibited on-duty intercourse. A 2003 national study by the Police Professionalism Initiative found that 40% of reported cases of police sexual misconduct involved teens, often young women involved in youth engagement and job shadowing programs. Despite our reluctance to state plainly what mass incarceration is, it's why abolition is neither radical nor unnecessary. Abolition is about preventing harm and the fundamental recognition that what we're doing now doesn't do that, because it's not meant to. Instead, it makes matters worse, because it's meant to. Even if we believe that there are just bad, poor people doing violent things, what is solved by locking those people in a box and making them spend every waking moment defending themselves from violence, sexual assault, and other abuses, all while trying to survive the psychological abuses of incarceration? If we also saddle them with fines and criminal convictions that prevent them from ever leaving poverty or the circumstances that led them to prison, not only have we done nothing to address the violent crime that's been condemned, we've given them every reason to act violently in the future. Then those people are released and sent back into the same struggling, under-resourced communities. That's why mass incarceration only ensures that communities that were already plagued by crime and violence never escape it. That's the problem with using prisons to disappear people while never addressing the underlying problems. The problems survive, even if the people don't. That's why defunding the police, ending cash bail, and other laws, policy, and reform efforts that actually take power away from the state and decarcerate are central to getting us to a world without policing and prisons. But while FAIR doesn't create that world, it is precisely what keeps 2 million people locked behind bars, while the social ills that led them there rage on unaddressed. It's what keeps us protesting America's criminal system, all while continuing to invest in that system. It's not fear of the people we've locked away. It's fear of the reckoning with the fact that despite incarcerating more people than anywhere else in the world and spending more money on some local police departments than other countries spend on their militaries, you aren't and don't feel any safer. The fear is in starting over. The daunting task of what it would mean to start from scratch. The fear of trying to create something new and possibly failing. The fear of admitting that all the harm mass incarceration has caused was for naught. And knowing that what's been done to people, communities, generations cannot be made right. Fear, just like guilt and defensiveness, cannot create. But it does keep us stuck in place, hiding our problems behind bars. Everybody knew peacocks were fly as fuck, but did you know they could fly? Like, we knew they ran. They're always walking freely about the zoo, but knowing that they know how to fly really adds a different layer to it. And we recently learned that they could fly because one of them peacocks flew their ass out the Bronx Zoo, went gallivanting through the night, and came back when they was good and ready, child.